Chris, thanks so much for the introduction. It's a pleasure to be here, and thanks, guys, for turning out. Tonight is really a special night for me because I get to present with Silver Oliver. Silver was the principal information architect at the BBC. For those of you that don't know that, the BBC is the world's largest broadcaster, and Silver and his team, Paul Wilton, who's also here in the audience somewhere, Silver and his team really have given the semantic community, the semantic web community, probably their one of their strongest use cases, right? This dynamic semantic publishing initiative. And I can remember back when we started Tagasaurus, that was a point of significant inspiration for us. And I think just the opportunity to work with Silver as a colleague and present with him is tremendously exciting for me. And so I'm going to try to bring all this together in some sort of meaningful way here. Let me just jump out of Chris's presentation. So, yes, I'm a founder of Tagasaurus. I'm going to kind of take you guys through a little bit of a story about what we're doing. Try to build on what Chris talked about, this idea of trying to make images and video on the web computational, understandable by computers. So we're attempting to build an intelligent data platform for visual content. Our view is that we can create content that is sort of aware of itself, but beyond that, to create content that is relationship aware, aware of the broader set of relations in the world. So for approximately 3 years, Tagasaurus has been working on this problem, starting with the content-aware problem first, and then in the last year, really working hard on the semantics problem, and that's where we've reached out to Silver and his team, to Matt Petrillo, who's also another member of this community. He was at Ontotext. He's come over to help guide that project at Tagasaurus. And so we're going to just talk a little bit about how we view the world and what some of the challenges are, because it's such an interesting set of problems. Just from 30,000 feet, sort of beliefs, things that we really feel strongly about. The images, people talk about the semantic gap. And the semantic gap is sort of this gap between what a computer knows when it looks at a piece of media and what a human being knows. As a human, as Chris said, it's trivial. We look at an image, we can see very clearly this is a guy swimming. I fed this to a bunch of AI systems that are computer vision systems, and that are the state of the art, the winners of the Trek Image Recognition Challenge in 2013, 2014. This came back as an airport departure lounge. That's not good enough, right? So computers, images don't have intelligences. Computer can't read it. We need some way to describe the subject matter of the image, describe the content. So images aren't smart. That's a challenge. The other thing that's sort of corollary to that is that visual content really turns out to be the currency of the web today, right? So we think about whether it's Instagram or Facebook or Flipboard or any service online. These things are increasingly driven by images and video content. And we believe that visual content is really the currency that's driving this new web. But people talk about the new visual web, and I would assert that the new visual web is almost a kind of misnomer, because it's not really a visual web at all. It's sort of like that trash that's floating in the middle of the Pacific. It's not part of a web until you make it part of a web. You have to make it smart. And so before we're going to have a truly visual web, we need to make content intelligent, and we need to find a way to interconnect it. And I think if you can stop for a minute and think about a web where content is intelligently interconnected, visual content, video, images are intelligently interconnected, I think you can really start to get excited about a world where maybe the analogy would be something like music. I mean, if you guys have lived through the sort of computer music revolution, we had our tracks, we'd burn our CDs. Remember, it was like rip, burn, and share. This was the Apple tagline, and you'd rip, burn, and you'd have to tag all this stuff and share it out over services like Napster. And now just think where that's come. It's Pandora, it's Spotify. They're programmed experiences, right? And what happened to make that possible? Well, people got in there and they described all that information with metadata about the content. And that's what needs to happen really at web scale before we're going to have a kind of audio-visual web that is intelligently interwoven. And so those beliefs that images aren't smart, that the visual web is exciting, and that the possibilities that are inherent in that are tremendously exciting, those are the things that drive everything we do. And I want to talk a little bit about how we do what we do and sort of the challenges that we're facing. So as I said before, without metadata, this image isn't particularly smart. With metadata, it can at least become content aware, right? And so there's this idea that we can add tags to an image. Those tags could be entities, they could be semantic, they could be derived from a structured data set like Wikipedia or DBpedia, I should say, or geonames, and added to the image. So it creates this kind of actionable layer of information within a piece of online audiovisual content. We built, to do that, a human-assisted computing platform. So the idea behind human-assisted computing is a lot like what Chris was talking about, this idea of getting humans and computers to work together collaboratively to do things that neither constituency would do well at in isolation. So we use computer vision. We have face detectors and face recognition systems. But we also have humans. We have humans to train those systems, humans to adjudicate the output of those systems, and in some cases, humans to add interpretive information to a piece of video or a photo, where a computer just is completely incapable of adding value. And this was really when we started Tagasaurus, this was really the core thing we started focusing on, this idea of building a human-assisted compute process. And we've run that for 2.5 years. We've run that for some of the biggest asset owners, visual asset owners in the world, large publishers, large media companies, entertainment companies. I think we really understand a lot about that. But in doing that, I think we also learned a lot about what the problems are, and what the problems are with the current generation of technology, the current systems that serve this kind of data, what their limitations are. And that's when, about the time I met Chris and Matt Petrillo, and we were thinking about what the BBC was doing with dynamic semantic publishing, this idea that you could put together a kind of narrative or a story dynamically. And we said, what if we could go beyond just making images content aware, tagging them effectively? What if we could get beyond that? What if we could make images relationship aware, or media, online media? What if we could make it relationship aware? And if we could make it relationship aware, we could start to create storylines, and we could start to create narratives and user journeys that could take us places in a purely visual way. And it's the use of semantics and the use of ontologies that allow us to start to think in this way. And it's not just images, it's also video, and it's not just whole video, but sections of video. So you think of the news, your classic news at 6 there's many little segments in there. And you want to be able to segment using shot and scene segmentation, each of those little segments, and then describe the subject matter of each of those little segments separately so that you can sort of think of wikifying network news or think of wikifying entertainment. And we'll talk about that more in this presentation. So it's not just images. And that really is made possible by the semantics. And I think we're so lucky tonight to have Silver here, because this is where I'm going to ask him to come up and talk about that, because these guys have done it at scale at the world's largest broadcaster, and I don't think there's a better person that you could have to give you kind of a presentation on that than Silver.
I see, thank you. Then the semantics is about increasing the value of those tags. So on one side, reducing the cost to gain the tags on the images, on the media, and on the other side is, if we can get these hooks, these semantic hooks, we can do so much more with them. So we're tackling it on both sides at the same time. And as Todd said, myself, a number of people in the audience were involved in the BBC with developing this design pattern, if you like, which was dynamic semantic publishing. And then for the last 3 years, I've been working with a consultancy called Data Language, and we've gone around other organizations and given them dynamic semantic publishing platforms. And the pattern's the same every single time in finance, healthcare, broadcasting. And essentially it's this, that if, when you're annotating, those tags are hooks, in our case URIs, what essentially you're doing is every piece of content is actually hooked into a larger graph, and as that graph gets richer and richer, our potential to create good user experiences get better. So in some ways we have our content here, our domain model, our graph is a lens that we can shine the content through and create better and better user experiences, and I guess that's the metaphor, if you like. And when we're explaining this to people, quite often go back to an old project, which was a bit of a benchmark project, I think, which is BBC Food. So essentially, BBC Food were relaunching the site. It was all about generating increased reach. And rather than just thinking about what content do we have, what assets do we have, the starting point is think about what is food, and sit down with the subject matter experts. And anyone here who's ever sort of, developed an ontology is a familiar process, but essentially domain model food. So you sit down with the subject matter experts, and food is about recipes, diets, ingredients, seasons, and techniques, and you get this domain model, these important entities and relationships as your first, your editorial view of the world, if you like. And I think what was really exciting about the food project was they then validated this model through doing some search referral analysis, so taking BBC Food and its competitor sites, and then looking at search referrals over a 12-month period. So, not particularly surprising, you get things like Christmas time, people are searching for mince pie recipes, cranberry sauce, and mulled wine. But what you really start to see is people are looking for dishes and not necessarily recipes. And what we were missing the first time in the model was this notion of dish, and actually it just became aware that this dish is this canonical thing that all user journeys, all the search engine optimization should go through, because people want to find mince pies, and then you find the various different recipes. And I know it's a fairly basic example, but I think it's just these layers of validating. So the next stage is we've got an editorial view of the world, we've validated it against our users, and now we start to think about what we're trying to do with the product. And you can do this drawing a line around, if we can just get recipes, with a recipe, if we can just get dish, chef, and ingredients tagged on these recipes, essentially get these URIs on there, then the graph will take care of the rest. As we decide to build in other aspects of the graph, like seasons or being able to search by a certain cuisine, we can keep developing them. And as the domain model gets richer, the product can get richer. But we're confident if we get these 3 tags, then essentially everything else we can build because it's just part of the larger graph. So that's essentially what we do. Rather than just saying to editorial teams, tag this, what's this about? We say, if you give us the chef, the ingredients, and the dish, all you need to do, and just do that well. And I think the other exciting bit was just the impact this site had. I think there's a number of aspects in terms of user experience, but the other side of that was in terms of, and it has changed now, actually. Originally, when they first launched it, they were exposing that domain model as part of rich snippets, so exposing the image, cooking times, and things like that. And what we're seeing was this amazing conversion rate that differentiating yourself on the page. So not only is it about where you appear on the page, but also differentiating yourself from other links. But what's really interesting over the last 12 months, year and a half, is everyone else is doing it now, and there's this sort of war of differentiating in the page, yeah? So So I think I won't read through these, but I think that the bottom line was it was a very, very successful project and really benchmarks the use of domain modeling and thinking about semantics of the BBC. And essentially, this is how every website's built at the BBC. This is the approach. And that's essentially the design pattern. So what's really exciting about Tagasaurus is the BBC can do that for high-value content, but when you're dealing with a huge archive of images, how does this scale? How do you do dynamic semantic publishing on a massive scale in large archives with potentially, a lot less resources than the BBC have? So in Tagasaurus, again, we're looking at this lens that we're shining through, and what we're putting there is something that's called media graph, which is a rich database, rich knowledge graph of instances, and then some common models in there that we can, if we can get the platform to get these tags onto the images, we can then use media graph, this lens, to create interesting user experiences, and as that graph gets richer, so do the user experiences. So one example of that would be fashion. One of Tagasaurus's clients is Trunk, and we have a general fashion model. And essentially what that allows us to do is associate, identify particular garments, accessories, other fashion-related things, and then from that garment, the properties of that. So whether it's a black dress, cotton, the style of the dress, and equally we have the ability for the setting in terms of if it's New York City and the city, and we sort of capture this rich model around an image. And actually to do things like find a black dress is incredibly difficult if you ever search on Google for black flowers, black dress. It's a perennial problem in image searching. So what we're doing is we're capturing this rich graph around an image, but I think the really exciting thing is that because we have the model, we can start to ask smart questions, and you can farm those questions off to different systems. So you might say, first of all, we're going to get the machine just to see if there's a person in the picture, and then we can move through to the next workflow, which is if we find a person, let's get a Turker to identify if they're wearing a certain type of garment. If we get a dress, we know dresses are valuable to us, so we can then move on, say our model knows that for a dress we're looking for patterns, material and style, and we can start combining these things together and taking advantage of the platform that Tagasaurus built out to generate the type of experiences that the dynamic semantic publishing platform creates. So it's really merging these two different memes and creating something really, really exciting that couldn't be done before. So as you farm these tasks out, the sort of the thing that a particular Turker will see is a very, very specific targeted question, which is identify the type of garment in this picture. And once we know that next stage, it can potentially go into another workflow, or if it's a low-value garment that we're not interested, that might be the end of it. But we can start to control getting the high-value tags off this understanding of the model and catching this sort of rich data in the background. And I think what it's really doing is allowing for a richness of data around images that just have never had the ability to create before. And I think that's incredibly exciting for me to work on, just putting these two things together.
We've got a big knowledge base behind the scenes that captures a lot of these concepts and the instances of the concepts, the relationships between the concepts. How do we make this real? So let me show you a couple things that are going on. So if you're an online publisher, the experience you're delivering today is not radically different than the experience you delivered on paper, at least with respect to the image. So the page may have some links, it may be interactive, but the image is just about as dumb on that page as it is in print. We think there's an opportunity to fix that, to take content and just light it up. And we think that that can drive engagement, that can, if you think about companies like Taboola and Outbrain, that are either bringing folks on to sites from a content network or recirculating traffic on site. We think there's an opportunity to power that in an intelligent way. So to take people on user journeys using an image or a video fragment as kind of a seed for that. And so this is an example that we've been working on with one of the large newspaper publishers. In the broadcast space, you know, there's this, you think about television programs, series, things like TV series. Anytime something happens on that show, people are on their iPads, they're on Twitter, they're maybe at Facebook saying something, they're maybe on LinkedIn. They kind of leave the context of the show and go somewhere else. And so if you're thinking about a video on demand application or a second screen potentially application, and you want to bring all that together, how do you do that? And that's something we've been thinking about. For example, how to take a series and wikify that series down to the shot level of granularity, and then bring all of the related content together on screen, on a second screen app, or in a VOD application. And so the example here, we have a character, we have all the other characters that co-occur with that character within a given episode, but that can be expanded to a season or a series. That data, that programming can be sort of wikified, as I said, completely. And you can do that in terms of shopification as well. So you can think about taking entertainment programming, wikifying it, and shopifying it at the level of shots and scenes, and then bringing that all together in a live experience in a touch interface. And I think that just creates, you know, massive new conversion possibilities for broadcasters. For the education community, this is actually a live project. We've been working initially with Laura Roro and then with the folks at Eurocom in the south of France on a project called HyperTED. And what we did was we took the TED corpus and we fed the TED corpus, all the TED Talks, through a shot and scene segmenter to break them down into the most granular elements. And we took the transcripts and we extracted entities from the transcripts. We took and created chapters for each of the talks, and we created hotspots within the video. And the whole system, you can search HyperTED for linked open data, and you'll find every talk that discusses the topic of linked open data. And when you click on them, you'll jump directly to the fragment where someone is talking about linked open data, and then the system will automatically recommend all the other talks that are related to that specific topic. And again, it's all fragmented. You can share the fragments, you can tweet the fragments. It all runs in a standard HTML5 technology, so there's no black box component to this. So that's another great example of how we're using this human-assisted compute technology with semantics to start to light up more interconnected networked audiovisual experiences. And I think there's other obvious examples in terms of analytics, in terms of reach and SEO. I mean, Silver talked about how the BBC was able to increase the reach they had significantly for food by putting those little thumbnails in the organic search results. So now think about that in terms of video. Think in terms of, I can now take my news content, I can wikify that, and then I can poke the interest events into Google organic search results as thumbnails. And this is exactly what is going on with HyperTED. So each of those hotspots become indexable. So if you think about that, 2,000 TED Talks, that's 2,000 indexable items in the Google search index today. HyperTED can put tens of thousands of relevant topics into the Google search results and bring people directly to the topic that they're interested in, and then from there let them go off and explore. So I think there's really interesting applications in terms of reach and SEO. And that's sort of the overview of what we're working on with this view of, this view that we want to create. We increasingly, as a society, express ourselves through pictures, through images, and through video. And our view is that we want to make that computational. We want to allow computers to reason over that data directly and to create new classes of experiences, of online experiences on top of that data. And that's the challenge that we're up against. And I think if we get it, it'll be exciting, but it's a big project. Anyway, I thank you guys all for showing up tonight. It's great. Great to be here. Thanks again, WeWork.